0.
Congratulations, India.
It is indeed a moment of glory for India and a moment of destiny for all of us over here at Sriharikota who are a part of the history in making.
The soft lunar landing of Chandrayaan-3 has proved beyond doubt India's ability to lead the world in space missions. Union Minister of Science and Technology Dr. Jitendra Singh quoted Prime Minister Narendra Modi as saying that sky is not the limit. In an exclusive interview with The Week, Singh said that it is the first time any spaceship has landed in the South Pole area of the moon and the entire world is interested to know more. The findings, the pictures, the inferences obtained by Chandrayaan-3 are also going to be utilized by the premier agencies like NASA and other countries. Meanwhile, work has already begun on the next mission or two, before a human is sent to space as early as end of 2024. What does the success of Chandrayaan-3 signify for India and the rest of the world?
I think my first thought is, if you see around the kind of jubilation that is happening, the celebration across the country is itself indicator of the fact that something unusual has happened. A landmark has taken place. The entire country, the entire nation is excited about it, and they are excited about it also because as layman, it appears as if a conquest has been won. Having started very late in this rather more sophisticated area of space technology compared to some of the other countries like the USA or the then USSR. Today India reaffirms its position and also reaffirms its capability to take a lead in global issues, global subjects, be that space, be that clean energy, be that climate concerns. Now from the point of view of the scientific fraternity, I think the celebration among the scientific fraternity also is a reflection of a kind of a headway that has been made as far as unfolding the mysteries of moon is concerned. From a layman's point of view, it might be more of romanticism, trying to discover the mysteries or getting behind those mysteries which have enchanted them, fantasized them since their childhood with folklore and through cinema and songs. But for the scientific fraternity, it's also a headway towards discovering the actual elements that determine the entire milieu of the moon. Like for example, Chandrayaan-1 gave us the evidence of the presence of the water molecules embedded in the mineral elements, which is a direct or an indirect indicator of the presence of or the compatibility or the possibility of human life being there. And now this Pragyan and this mission, after having landed successfully, would set out to work.
How do you see India taking a lead in space exploration with this success?
As far as this journey to moon is concerned, I think it's placed India as in that elite league of 3 or 4 nations. And also, what is often not talked about is that if we have succeeded in landing in the second attempt, it should not, the first attempt should be seen in that context, in the sense that most of the other countries also have not been absolutely successful in the first attempt. And many of the countries, including US, have been found to be landing after 4 or 5 or 6 attempts. So which means that India's human resource, India's capability is in many ways even ahead of the others. What we were lacking was possibly an enabling milieu, and I think this is again an occasion, as I've been saying day in and day out, on behalf of the entire scientific fraternity, to thank the Honourable Prime Minister, Shri Narendra Modi. But for him, it might not have been possible, the kind of patronage we have received, the kind of promotion we have received, and the kind of freedom that we have received, because you would appreciate that till a few years ago, Sriharikota and ISRO were banned to the rest of the world. Now the entire world is owning up. The manner in which celebration is happening across the section. The youth are celebrating, college boys starting celebrating, school children celebrating, housewives celebrating, youth celebrating, media persons celebrating, because they have owned up this mission. And they could own up this mission because this mission was exposed to all of them. The gates of Sriharikota were thrown open by Prime Minister Modi. And when the launching happened on July 14, we had more than 1,000 media persons physically present in the premises watching. And this same Sriharikota, which is forbidden, a media person or anybody else could not even peep inside the gate. And therefore there was no sense of belonging to that mission. And I think on the one hand, the unlocking of the space sector of India has led to increased funding, increased private participation. We have more than 150 startups already there. Some of them are state-of-art startups. Some of those startups have also started making good fortune out of their projects, a lucrative source of livelihood. And on the other hand, there is a sense of belonging as far as Sriharikota and all its work is concerned.
How do you see India's space technology compared with other countries? There is an argument that we are giving budget allocation to space missions when there are more pressing problems here.
Yeah, see, I would rather try to describe it at two levels, because that is something which is not often talked about. A, of course, as we've been talking till now, our ability to reach out to the space is now proven beyond doubt. As Prime Minister recently said, space is no limit. So we've actually gone beyond space to discover the unexplored areas of the universe. So that is one area. The other part, which is I think quite unique to India, is that we have in the last 8-9 years, particularly after Prime Minister Modi came in, been able to, and that again because we were given the freedom to do that, apply space technology in the infrastructure development as well. So space technology today has entered virtually every Indian household. It has entered every other ministry. It has entered every other department. It has entered every other sectoral department. If you talk of railways, the laying down of railway tracks, the guarding of unmanned crossings, the warnings about accidents, the forewarning about possibility of an accident or possibility of a potential obstructing agent being there on the rail track, all being provided through space technology. If we go to urban development, we say smart cities. If we go to irrigation, you have all these heli surveys of the water underneath as far as the Jal Shakti is concerned. If you go to mapping, farming, survey, you have this Swamito program, the most ambitious program, I think biggest in the world, where you are mapping all the farms, all the lands, again because of through the space. If you talk of the success story in COVID, it is telemedicine, again space technology. So I think space technology has been very optimally utilized in the 8-9 years that have passed by in the infrastructure development, which is not possibly seen to that extent even in other countries like UK and all. You hardly, I mean, it's more of confined to the experimentations in sending rockets and the spaceships rather than putting it to this kind of view. So I think that is one of the biggest achievements, particularly for a country like India, which is fast developing, and that not only proves cost effective for us, but also hastens the pace.
ISRO has been working on a limited budget and there have been cost constraints for some of the missions. Do you feel the budget allocation should be increased?
Even though I agree with you, ISRO was constrained of funds to an extent, but we made up for that deficiency through human resource. Because the passion was so much, the commitment was so much. You can see those archive pictures of Sarabhai, his team carrying launcher on the carriage of bicycle. I mean, even if they didn't have the means of transport, they were adamant about going ahead. So we made up through our passion, through our commitment for what we did not have maybe monetarily. So that is one aspect. But having said that, if you have to compete globally, if you have to live up to global change, you have to go a step ahead of the global competition. I agree with you, funding has to be increased. And I think the decision taken by Prime Minister Modi to unlock the space sector, to open it to private sector is a move in that direction. That's why I said within 3-4 years we have 150 or more private startups. So they are supplementing the funds. Secondly, the very recent Anusandhan National Research Foundation, which is being passed by the Parliament, which will come into being in the course of time, also takes care of this. There's about out of 50,000 crore per 5 years, as much as 36,000 crore is envisaged to be raised to the private sources, whether it be the philanthropists, whether it's the domestic sources, the foreign sector, the industry. So, and I firmly believe, and I'm sure all of us believe, that if we have to go beyond this, you have not to be tied down by the constraints of funds. So it should not be a limiting factor for you. And if that is to be done, then you cannot leave everything to the government resources, because the government has its own limitation. So all of us have to synergize. And the era of silos is over. So demarcation between private and public is gradually getting away. You've seen this even in the space sector in the USA is being, to a great extent, also being handled by the private sector. And we are also moving in the same direction, because we are in a position to accept the global competition, global challenges, and to live up to the global parameters.
How tough is lunar landing for a human or an unmanned spacecraft?
Lunar landing has happened, and you've seen, of course, it's very precise, it's to be monitored very minutely, like in the case of the earlier mission of the Chandrayaan. In the last few minutes, it did not happen the way we had expected. So the pace of it, the velocity, the gravitational balances have to be accordingly done. But this time around, since we had taken care of all those learning from the past experience, also added on, because each day the technology upgrading is also happening. So it's happened very smoothly. There are certain sensitive moments for any scientific mind. Personally, for me, more than anything else, it was the moment when the Chandrayaan was to get out of the Earth's orbit and head towards the Moon's orbit. So I was a little, I would not say nervous, but I was very sensitively watching, because it's like changing the track while you are driving a car. So suddenly you are asked to change from one track to the other track, which is quite some distance ahead, and you have to negotiate very smoothly, also taking care not to cause any mishap while you are doing so. And that happened very successfully in the middle of one night, when it left the Earth's orbit and took a translunar route, and then finally entered into. And then, of course, gradually it kept descending downwards and finally came to the innermost orbit. And then the last few minutes, of course, as always, are to be watched very carefully. In fact, the added stress is that the entire world is watching, because this is one mission which not only India, but the rest of the world is equally anxiously watching.
When can we expect a human mission?
We are going to have 2 missions before we send the actual human being, because I totally agree with you. Getting back human being safe and sound is rather more important than sending him up to the space. We have the first mission, which will happen possibly in the end of this year or maybe beginning of the next year, where for a few hours, possibly this September itself we are planning, first, if all goes well, which will go up for a few hours and then come back as it should to the waters, so that we can see whether we are able to control its safe return without any damage happening. Then if that is successful, then again we will have a second trial, which might be in the beginning of next year. Therein we will not send a human being, but we will send a human robo. This is a female robo, has been designed, called Vayomitra. She would behave as the human being is expected to behave in the actual human mission. So no risk of life as such. But she will come back in the same route, land, and then would be brought out. And this is going to be a very collective effort. You will have coastal guards there, you will have Navy personnel there, bringing out the human beings safe to the surface. And then if that is also successful to our satisfaction, which we are quite confident would happen, then we will send the final mission, which will be the human mission. Possibly would happen in 24, maybe second half, because actually we had planned it for somewhere around 22, but unfortunately we got delayed because of COVID for 2-3 years. In fact, when lockdown happened, some of our potential astronauts were undergoing training in the Gregory Center in Moscow because they have number of different exposures. So they had to be called back. So then everything was shut down. I think that threw us back by about 2 years.
How do you see India emerging as a space power?
I think to an extent we have already emerged and the rest of the world has started expecting us. You would recall the recent visit by Prime Minister Modi to Washington DC was the entire bilaterals and the bilateral agreements, negotiations were technology driven. And that too in technology space was dominating. For example, you had the Artemis agreement which has already 20-25 countries are signatories, India was not, USA had been persuading India finally. Then it was less India but more US which solicited India's astronauts to accompany them to the space station. So which means that they value now India's resource. So we are now not only praised equally, but in some certain ways we are also looked up to give a lead. So I think in the next 25 years, as we in India say, oh, is Amrit Kal and we will be reaching the pedestal, that ascent of India has begun through the space sector. I would rather put it that way.